Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us at this latest ADGM webinar. In this series of webinars designed to provide information and support to the community during these challenging business times. My name is Tim Land, Executive Director of Monitoring and Enforcement at ADGM, and for today's webinar, joining me will be my colleagues Lisa Summers and Natala Safa Ali. If you're watching us through LinkedIn, then please send your questions through the comments box. We're going to have a Q&A session after we finish running through some information and some slides for everyone. If you're watching this on YouTube, I believe you can also put your comments or your questions in the comments box, and we'll pick those up as well. So with having mentioned that, we'll move to the agenda. Okay, so today's session is really about going into more detail, providing greater explanations and discussion, and hopefully answering all your questions about what are all the financial and non-financial support measures that ADGM has put in place to help you during these challenging times. We're going to focus on those support measures that are administered by the Registration Authority today. We're also going to discuss the current health and safety requirements and restrictions in place in the free zone in Almarai Island in light of the current, obviously, COVID-19 pandemic. And we're also going to discuss what are the features of ADGM's commercial legislation and our online registry solution that can also help support you in the current environment where a lot of businesses are working remotely. I'm going to start the session today with discussing the COVID-19 requirements on Almarai Island. So first of all, it's really important to note that ADGM takes the health and safety of its community, whether that's employees, staff, visitors, residents, clients, and so on, as its #1 priority. And I really want to take this opportunity to thank all the ADGM community for their support and their adherence to all the requirements that we've issued to date to help ensure collectively that the community has stayed safe. We've been monitoring the situation and putting out information, requirements and circulars from the get-go. The first circular was issued at the beginning of March, and we've issued a lot of circulars and guidance since then. Most of those requirements have centered around those two categories of businesses you can see there on the right-hand side, retail and hospitality. We've been working with our partners in Abu Dhabi government, whether it's the Department of Culture and Tourism, the Department of Economic Development, and also the Abu Dhabi Agriculture and Food Safety Authority, to ensure that we take an aligned and consistent approach to all the requirements for health and safety, particularly, as I say, in relation to retail business and the hospitality businesses on the island. So what I want to focus on in today's session and in the next slide is what are the requirements for financial services and professional services firms, particularly as office-based businesses look to come back to the office. So first of all, on this slide, it's really important to point out that there's a maximum capacity restriction in place. That's a 30% office occupancy maximum at any given point in time. Now, we appreciate that it's slightly different levels in different areas, but in ADGM, and I think in Abu Dhabi generally, the current office occupancy maximum is 30%. We are monitoring and liaising with all the competent authorities at both the Abu Dhabi level and the federal government level to make sure that as and when those levels change, we will update them. But right now, it's 30%. The second key point to note is that only eligible staff should be coming back to the office. And who are eligible staff? Well, that is #1. Only staff that are between the ages of 18 and 60 should be coming back to the office right now. Out of that category of staff of 18 to 60, it's only those who live alone or with what's defined as lower risk individuals as well. And the staff members themselves should not be suffering from a medical condition, which is also defined. Now, lower risk individuals, sorry, let's go back for one slide for a second. Lower risk individuals are those who are below 60, not pregnant, or suffering from a medical condition. So by that we mean staff members who, even if they are between 18 and 60, and even if they are not suffering from a medical condition, so they're healthy, if they happen to live with elderly parents or a pregnant partner, or someone in the home who has a medical condition, that would also make them ineligible to come back to the office right now. So the next slide is about, once your staff are back in the office, what are the requirements for operating? The first requirement is that all staff must wear masks at all times in the presence of others. And secondly, you should ensure that there is physical and social distancing between desks, obviously, and staff members, between reception areas and people who are entering the reception desk area. Businesses may want to think about splitting personnel, both to ensure that they can stay below the 30% maximum threshold for occupancy, but also as a redundancy in case perhaps a staff member becomes infected, and that way if you're splitting the teams up and on a rotation basis, then if you've got an infected team member in one group, then it may not necessarily affect the other group. Face-to-face meetings should be discouraged at all times, but if they're absolutely necessary, then you must ensure that there's social distancing within the meeting rooms. We're not going to put a maximum or minimum number requirement around who can be in a meeting room, because obviously all meeting rooms are of different sizes and shapes, but just ensure that there is physical separation if face-to-face meetings are absolutely required. Hand sanitizer should be readily available. If you have a reception area or a common seating area for staff, that must be closed unless you can put measures in place to ensure that there's social distancing in those common areas or social areas or reception areas. For example, obviously, well, not obviously, but we've seen some creative measures put in place by businesses around the world to ensure physical separation in restaurants, whether it be by putting mannequins or teddy bears. But in any case, if you've got social or common areas or reception areas with sofas, couches, you must ensure that they're somehow blocked off, to not entirely, but if you can block off one side of the sofa, for example, to ensure that there's physical distancing, that's a must. But if you cannot do that, you have to close it. You should, of course, ensure that there's daily disinfection of the office, or more if you can do it. And we would really encourage you to have a conversation with your staff around health and safety practices and good habits around health and safety and the requirements, and making sure that all staff are doing the right thing, supporting each other to ensure a safe and healthy environment in your office. I'll be happy to take any questions on that are coming through when we get to the Q&A, but I'll move on now to what is an example of one of the non-financial support measures that ADGM has put in place. So that is an extension for annual accounts filings. Now, this being annual accounts applies to ADGM companies and limited liability partnerships. Most companies and limited liability partnerships currently have up to 9 months, I should say, after their accounting reference date or financial year end to file accounts. But for those businesses that are suffering from COVID-19, either themselves, and that is operationally suffering, financially suffering, in the current challenging environment, there's delays caused by their auditor or by their accountant not being able to arrange the preparation of accounts in time, for example, then these businesses, your business, will be able to apply to us for a 3-month extension, up to a maximum 3-month extension to file your accounts, which would then in total give you a period of 12 months to file the accounts. In order to avail this measure, you do need to apply to the Registration Authority. There is an application form available to download from our support measures website. You would fill in the application form and submit it, sign it and submit it by email. It needs to be reviewed, and only if approved, or only if the application is granted, do you then have the extension. Don't assume that you automatically have the extension just by applying. Please wait to hear back from the Registration Authority to confirm that you have received that extension before you rely on it. Again, please send your questions through as we're discussing these points, and we'll pick them up in the Q&A. I'll now move on to my colleague Lisa Summers to discuss the next section.
Hi everyone. In this section, I'm just going to cover off a refresher on the financial support measures that have been put in place by the Registration Authority for both new applicants as well as existing registered entities with ADGM. So on this first slide, you will see some details on the financial support measures that have been put in place for new applicants. These were actually introduced on the 3rd of May this year, and they'll be valid until the 31st of December this year, 2020. There's two key areas that it covers off. So there's one, the 50% reduction in registration fees, and two, a waiver on continuation fees. It's important to note those eligible types of entities for these waivers or support measures. So it is for the standard operational companies that cover financial, non-financial, and retail. We have made a decision that the subcategories for now, such as tech startups, SPVs, investment companies, are not eligible for these waivers. This is due to the fact that they're already on a massively discounted rate with ADGM, but we will continue to review this as the time goes on. The discounts, as you can see, are applied across the various line items that are included in the registration process. So that includes name reservation and the business application if it's applicable. It's important to note as well that, for example, if you decide to do a standalone name reservation, that discount is also applied. The system has been fully updated, so once you hit the payment page for a new registration or incorporation, those updated fees are available, so there's no workaround required on that. Moving on to the next slide, I will talk to you about the waivers that are put in place for the existing entities, so for the existing community. These were introduced on the 25th of March this year and are valid for one full year, so until the 25th of March 2021. Again, the waiver covers two key areas. So there's a waiver on the license renewal fee and a waiver on the data protection renewal fee. Again, really important to note those eligible entities so people don't get stuck in the process. Again, those operational entities, so the financial, non-financial, and retail. And important to note in this one that tech startups are also included as part of this waiver program. SPVs, investment companies, foundations, etc. are not. For data protection renewal, however, all entity types have this waiver applied. So as soon as you start the application and you get through to where would usually be the payment page, your application is automatically submitted. There is no payment required for the data protection renewal. You will see that maybe if you're gone through the renewal process for some of your clients or one of our clients, you will see that sometimes we have a business activity line item that's still on the payment page. We are currently working to update the system so that this will be removed. However, we request now that if you fit within the eligible categories, that you then leave it on a pay status, so you decide to pay later, and on a daily basis, we run a batch run and we will automatically waive those fees for the license renewal for those applicable entities. If you've got any questions at all, if you're concerned about your eligibility, you're not sure, you can email us at any time at ors.support@adgm.com. You will see that email address as well when you log into the system. And finally, important to note that other filings, such as your annual return or any event-driven filings, the fees have not been waived for these. So please proceed and make the payment and submit the filings. I hope that covers off some of the key questions. I'm just going to pass over now to my colleague Natala, who's going to run through some of the digital services and companies regs.
Thank you, Lisa. In my session, I'll provide the overview of ADGM Online Digital Solution and how it supports the business operations during the COVID-19 pandemic. From the last week of March, the entirety of ADGM workforce is working remotely. So ADGM Registration Authority conducted impact analysis across each area of our business operations. We conducted assessment of our essential functions, and especially those that our clients heavily rely upon. And having conducted this analysis, we realized that we don't need to make too many changes because online registry solution is 100% digital. The only changes we had to do is to make some amendments and adjustments to the services that involve collection of physical original documents. Now, our digital solution is accessible 24/7 from ADGM website. It's available at every stage of the life cycle of the legal entity. Before you register, pre-registration, the actual registration, the life cycle of the entity. You can make all kinds of changes to your components of the legal entity, and all of that is done through using digital online solution. Most of you are very well familiar with this solution. For those who are not, I'll provide you a very quick overview of what happens if you want to access online registry solution of ADGM Registration Authority. You log in on the website, log into the online registry solution, and it's a self-registration for the user. Now, there's two options for registration of the user: individual and organization. Organization is the one that's used by corporate service providers who manage many accounts. They create one master account and sub-accounts. But you don't need to contact anyone in order to obtain your own credentials, your username and a password. You manage your account all the time on your own independently. Once you register as a user, you have access to your dashboard. You can start registering legal entities, registering real property interests, charges, and so on and so forth. The form can be completed online. It can be saved and left for completion later at any time. You make a payment online, and once you make a payment, we receive your application. We review your application. Sometimes we return it for clarification and questions, but most of the time we process it towards the approval. Once we hit the approve button, you receive the approval email with certificate of incorporation and commercial license attached to it. And you can access your account anytime. You can download your own filings, your own documents anytime. You can make changes to your company or partnership or foundation at any time. You're very much using your account independently. Now, on the next slide, I'll show you how we had to adjust our services that involved collection of the original documents. We enhanced the electronically issued documents by including signature and stamp on it. Our clients usually obtain these documents in order to take them to external authorities. And some external authorities still require original documents. In those instances, we issued support letters addressed to a certain external authority in relation to a particular legal entity in ADGM, and that worked really well. But most of the time, electronically issued documents with signature and stamp on it are working really well. Now, we have issued letters to many external support authorities in UAE, informing them that we're issuing electronic documents only. And that takes me very nicely to the next slide, where I wanted to provide you an overview of the most recent amendments of the company's regulations. We have amended our company's regulations on 5th of May. There are many amendments made to it, but I'm going to highlight only those that impact our operations in the ADGM Registration Authority. Now, there is a number of provisions in the company's regulations which set out circumstances where registrar must issue hard copy certificates. This is when we register a new legal entity, when we issue a certificate of name change, certificate of re-registration of legal entity, or certificate of continuation from another jurisdiction into ADGM. Now, we have received the practice shown that issuance of original documents, coordination with license holders for collection of those documents, high resolution printing, the expensive papers that we print them on and affix the wax seals, all of that proven to be inefficient and expensive. So we conducted the benchmark analysis with other registries, including local registries such as the AFC, the MCC, Department of Economic Development. And we found that most of them, or almost all of them, moved away from paper certificates to electronically issued one. And that's the reason we proposed a number of amendments to companies' regulations, abolishing the issuance of paper certificates and switching entirely to electronically issued documents. Persons seeking paper certificates will retain the option to request them at an additional fee. Now, subordinate rule on the fees that apply for issuing the paper certificates are yet to come. So watch that space. Now, with COVID-19 pandemic, it wasn't just a nice to have option to have electronically issued documents. It became a necessity to continue business operations. Now, another amendment that was done to companies' regulations, which is very important to operations of ADGM Registration Authority, is changing the name of annual returns to confirmation statements. Now, ongoing observation and feedback received from ADGM entities reveal that the term annual return is very often confused with the requirement to file accounts. A benchmarking exercise showed that the term annual return has been amended in UK Companies Act 2006 to be confirmation statement. The amendment was made to a number of provisions of companies regulations so that the reference to annual return is replaced with confirmation statement. Now, only a title of this filing has been changed. No contents of the filing has been changed. Now, annual return is known as a confirmation statement. And the last amendment I wanted to highlight in my session is the one that relates to definition of the members of the same family. This would be of interest to those who want to set up a single family office in ADGM using restricted scope company. Our old definition of members of the same family included person's parent, spouse, and children, including stepchildren. We received the comments and feedback from a number of ADGM stakeholders in relation to the current definition, to the old definition of members of the same family. And it became apparent that it's very restrictive. It's not enough. So we expanded our definition of members of the same family to include adopted children. We also expanded it to include the definition of persons which are descendants of the person. And that allowed to provide for multiple generations of single family offices. Now, as a result of definition, members of the same family now expanded beyond 2 generations that we had before. If you want to see the remaining amendments to companies' regulations, please log on to ADGM website, navigate to legal framework, and download the companies' regulations. We now have a combined version of all the previous amendments in one consolidated document with track changes. So it's very useful to look at that document. On that note, I'm going to pass on the mic back to Tim Land for Q&A session.
Thank you very much, Nutella, and thank you, Lisa. So lots of information that we can now sort of expand on as a more interactive discussion, having run through the slides. First of all, I really want to encourage everyone to raise your questions, put them in the comments box in LinkedIn. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, I believe you can put them in the comments box if you're watching this on YouTube as well. And keep the questions coming through because we've got plenty of time now to answer questions on all of these different topics that we've covered. And the first question is to Nutella, where can people find the ADGM Companies Regulations 2020?
Right, on ADGM website, we have a section which is dedicated to legal framework. You will find there Abu Dhabi legislation, federal legislation, and actually ADGM legislation. You have to look at commercial legislation, which is commercial regulations and rules. In there, you can find all the previous versions of companies' regulations and the current version, and also consolidated version of all the amendments.
Thanks very much, Nutella. I also want to point out that we will make those slides that we've just run through available after the presentation. I think we could, Lisa, we could look at posting that on the support measures page, perhaps.
Absolutely, yeah.
Please.
Sorry, so for those that haven't seen, we have a dedicated support measures page on adgm.com. You'll see a green bar at the top of the landing page. If you click on that, it will open up the whole section on the various support measures that we've introduced, guidance notes, items relating to what Tim was discussing earlier on the accounts extension, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a ton of resources there on that support measures page, so it's really worth checking out. There's been a question about what is ADGM-RA's view about introducing further support measures. I think all of us could probably jump in on that one, but if I was to share my observation first, it would be that we've come out pretty comprehensively and pretty quickly with the support measures that we did. We know that a lot of people are aware of them, but not everyone, and that's why we wanted to highlight them in more detail in this session today. We've generally had really positive feedback about the support measures so far, but even our CEO, Mr. Daha bin Daha, has said his door is open we want feedback. If there are more things that we can do, let us know. We're open to considering that. But we also want to see how the current support measures are working out as well. Lisa and Nutella, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we initially launched the first set of support measures on the 25th of March, we sent out a mass email to a lot of our community. Apologies if you weren't on that list. We used mainly the authorized users for entities from our online registry solution. In that email, we encouraged people to give us feedback on, any additional support measures or how they're finding things. We're continuously listening to the community to see what we can do to support you in these times. And so feel free to email us any suggestions, any feedback that you have, and we obviously take it into account when trying to move forward.
Yeah. Now, Lisa, this is a question that's probably for you. There's a question about visas at the moment. You're smiling. Sorry to pass that one to you. But what's the current situation on visas?
Okay, so the current situation, as most people I think are aware, that there's no new entry permits being granted as part of the wider UAE decision on entering and exiting the country. So at the moment, new visas are suspended. We can't issue a new entry permit for people. We can do visa transfer, but if you've got any questions related to visas, just email us at cases.accessadgm.com and we can get back to you, or at the ra@adgm.com. But in short, there's no new visas being issued at this stage. We follow the rules of the ICA and all other government entities in relation to visa issuance, but we will try and support you where possible. In addition, we understand that there are current visa holders that are stuck outside the UAE. If we hear anything to help bring these people back, then we will obviously publish that. We've published information as well on the COVID page on adgm.com regarding the permit form that needs to be applied to if you want to return to the country. It's gone a bit beyond the visa process, but the best thing is to keep an eye out on the COVID page, as well as we will send out notifications from Access ADGM to all users, whether it's guest or company users, to inform them of any changes that we hear of.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. And being that visas are sort of related to the ICA and federal government, and we're tied to following that, I'd also just point out that if you follow the ICA's Twitter account, you can get live, up-to-date information on what the current status is directly from them as well. Andrew sent through a question via the comments and regarding the accounts filing extension guidelines and application. And it's a really good question, or a good point to make, that the accounts filing extension that has been put in place sits within the company's regulations. So that applies at the registration authority level. This does not apply to financial services firms who need to submit their prudential returns to the financial services regulator, the FSRA. It only applies to your accounts filing requirements under the commercial regulations to the registration authority. Also, a question about economic substance. Economic substance is a really hot topic at the moment, and in fact, there's a lot to talk about when it comes to economic substance. So we're actually organising a dedicated webinar just for economic substance before the 30th of June, because we're mindful that there is the annual notification timeframe or deadline coming up at 30 June, not for all entities, but for some entities. And so we're going to cover economic substance in more detail in a dedicated webinar just for that. Got a question from Lindsay coming through the comments as well. Can you please confirm if discounted fees apply to authorization and supervision fees? So by authorization and supervision fees, I take it you mean FSRA's fees for financial services firms. The idea behind this webinar today, and Lisa and Tella and myself all sit within the Registration Authority, we wanted to provide more information about the financial support measures that the Registration Authority has put in place. There are a number of financial support measures that the FSRA has put in place, but we're just going to stick to the ones that we're responsible for administering. Don't want to give out the wrong information, but we can certainly get our colleagues in the FSRA to help you there, Lindsay, with clarifying that.
And I think that that's also included on the support measures page.
True, that's right. Thanks, Lisa. Question from Cassandra. Are you considering extending the ESR filing deadline in light of COVID-19? Yeah, again, great question. So the 30 June deadline for annual notifications for economic substance doesn't apply to all businesses. I know I said we're going to go into economic substance in its own dedicated webinar, but the question's been asked, so let me address it. The 30th of June deadline only applies to entities that A, conduct a relevant activity as defined under the economic substance regulations, and B, have a 31 December 2019 financial year end. So in other words, they are due to file, sorry, not file, but they're due to prepare accounts as at 31 December 2019. Those are the firms that need to file by 30 June. The deadline for filing has already been extended from originally what was going to be 31 March. It's been extended to 30 June because of COVID-19, so it's not going to be extended any further. Okay. What's the time frame for filing the annual return? The time frame for filing the annual return hasn't changed. As Nutella pointed out, that's now called the confirmation statement. Perhaps Nutella, do you want to talk to this one?
Yeah, sure. The annual return is due upon anniversary from the date of incorporation and every anniversary thereafter, and you have 28 days as a deadline to file your annual return. If you miss your 28 days, now we change it to 30 days actually, 1 month. If you miss your deadline, then every officer in the company is subject to default, which is a level 1 penalty.
Great, thanks very much. And yes, the time frame for all other filings, event-driven filings and annual filings, has not changed. It's just accounts filings at this stage.
Yeah, you still have to continue filing your statutory filings. A lot of people actually ask, can we, have we waived the fees for statutory filings? And can we take into consideration COVID-19 for statutory filings? The online solution is accessible from anywhere, and the restrictions of COVID-19 and traveling does not affect accessing the online solution. Now, as Lisa pointed out earlier, we did not waive those fees for statutory filings, which are event-driven filings, and we did not waive any of those. You're still required to file your statutory filings and ad hoc filings as and when they happen. You still have to comply with the deadlines.
Yeah, great point, Nutella. The extension granted to accounts filings was based on benchmarking internationally, along with recognizing the fact that companies may be struggling or challenged to get their accountants or auditors to assist them prepare their accounts in time. But in all other cases, if it's whether it be an annual return, which is now called a confirmation statement, or a change of director, for example, as per the information that Nutella shared about the online registry solution being accessible from anywhere, I mean, this was the whole point of ADGM being digital by default. It's really come to the fore at times like this. So we don't see any need at the moment to provide extensions for those other kinds of filings. So don't forget to keep your questions coming through on the comments box. Now's your chance to ask us anything around what are the current restrictions and health and safety requirements, what are the current support measures we've put in place, and how the system works to support you better during these current times. Just touching a bit more about those health and safety requirements. The measures that I talked about for officers and the return to office, we're going to be publishing in the next day or two, again on our support measures page, as a new Registration Authority circular that will come into effect as soon as it's published. The measures there in terms of the age groups, in terms of eligible persons, the capacity restrictions, and the actual requirements for when you're in the office itself with masks and physical separation and so on, will all be documented in that circular that will take effect as soon as it's published. It's important to note too that although we're starting to see restrictions starting to be reduced, it's not a time to become complacent. All businesses should be mindful of the fact that the health and safety of their employees is a legal requirement in ADGM, and they should be ensuring that they adhere to these health and safety measures. Again, we're really thankful to all businesses in ADGM for their adherence and support to the measures so far, but it's not a time to become complacent. If you do fail to meet the measures, the Registration Authority's monitoring and enforcement team may do inspections on offices, and there are penalties of up to $10,000 US for companies who fail to adhere to these requirements. I think it's in everyone's interest, and certainly in line with government requirements, that we cannot take anything other than a zero tolerance approach to ensuring health and safety while we're in the middle of the pandemic. Okay. Do we have any more questions coming through? There's a question around whether or not we have any more digital services in the pipeline. Do we have any ideas about more digital services that we can provide? Lisa and Nutella, would you like to discuss that?
I can have it if you want. So we are continuing to work on a lot of what we consider value-added services in the pipeline. So if you're a user of Access ADGM, you may have seen our integration with Anglo Gulf Trade Bank, and we are building on that to try and offer additional services outside the core services that the RA offer. Obviously, we're keen to hear any feedback or any services that you think that would be useful for us to introduce. But for now, I don't want to mention too much, because I think it'd be quite exciting once we go live with some of the quite innovative things that we're currently working on.
Yeah, just to add to that, we constantly review our existing services, and we look at how we can improve them, we can make them more efficient, easier and simpler to use. So it's a constant, it's constantly evolving. But there is something new I wanted to share with everyone very quickly. ADGM Registration Authority became a registered agent of Legal Entity Identifier. So LEI is very important for financial entities. So if you need your LEI, please contact ADGM Registration Authority at lei.services@adgm.com, and we can issue your LEI for you.
Yeah, great to point out, Nutella. I think ADGM is the first LEI issuer in the UAE.
Yes.
Is that right?
Correct.
First and only. So there's a question from Troy. Thank you, Troy, for sending through your question around the monitoring of the COVID-19 restrictions. Yes, the restrictions will be monitored. That's my team, in fact, that can do inspections on offices, and if we find that the requirements are not being adhered to, we can issue financial penalties of up to a maximum of $10,000 US. Again, all the firms we've been talking to so far, everyone's trying to do the right thing. Everyone's taking it really seriously, and we're grateful for that. But it's not a time to be complacent. And any firms that are willfully either neglecting or just failing to adhere to the requirements will be issued fines. Fines have been issued, not many, but they have been issued. So we do expect people to comply with the requirements. Okay. If we have any more questions coming through, or otherwise, if we've missed anyone's questions, we'll come back to you offline. Nutella, Lisa, do you have any final comments that you'd like to make? If there's no more questions coming through.
Thanks everyone for joining, and we hope that they found this quite useful.
Yes, thank you for joining.
Great. Yes, thanks everyone. Thank you for joining. Like Lisa said, we hope you found it useful. Please stay safe, and please keep an eye out on more ADGM webinars coming soon. In fact, tomorrow we've got a webinar on surviving post-COVID-19, so please make sure you don't miss that. Once again, thanks for your time. Thanks for joining. Hope you found it useful.